That was true even before we knew about chemistry. That was the definition of water before anybody knew anything about chemistry, before we knew about H2O. Back when Aristotle thought water was just an element. Nevertheless, it was
This
H2O.
isn't true.
I'm sorry?
This isn't true.
And so Bosch goes a little off the rails here. Actually, he goes way off the rails here.
That water has not always been H2O?
Yeah, all you have to do is cross the Mexican border. And over there, it's aqua. That's H2O, not water.
Aqua means water. Aqua is water.
It's a different term.
Actually, it's agua. It's not aqua, right?
And we're referring to terms and definitions here.
Bosch had a debate with Dr. Thomas Bogardus. And it didn't go well for Bosch. Bosch admitted to not preparing for this debate. And Dr. Bogardus is a PhD. He's a philosophy PhD. So this guy knows his stuff. He came prepared. He started out with a little PowerPoint slideshow laying out his positions very clearly, debunking all the avenues he thought Bosch might take, even quoting Bosch at several of these junctions. And the debate was, are trans women women? Dr. Bogardus reframed it to, by this phrase, when you say, are trans women women, it's probably implied that all trans, what's being implied is that all trans women are women. So, not 99.9, not 99.99999, 100% of trans women are women. And so that's what he went out to prove here. So Bosch had a very tall order. Because I think when they say are trans women women, it could be a little nebulous in what that means, and you might just say, yeah. But I think the way he set it up to be all really kind of made it so you couldn't kind of hedge a little bit. You had to really directly answer all trans women are women. And this led to a hilarious moment where Dr. Bogardus is trying to get across the idea that a concept can exist, that something can exist just naturally in a naturally occurring world outside the minds of humans. Even though humans have created a concept of this and have labeled it, we have a word for it, we've made our own definition for it. These labels, the idea, the definition, these are all human created. But these things don't really dictate what this thing is. These things that humans created were created at the directive of what we are perceiving of the thing in real life. So his example was water. So he said, Aristotle thought water was an element. It was this, singular entity, the singular unit, that exists naturally in nature, whatever. Similar to gold or iron or, helium or whatever. I'm sure the Greeks were much more familiar with pure metals than they were pure gases. And it turned out Aristotle was wrong. Even though the label water, their understanding of what water is on a layman level, right? Aristotle had the same layman understanding, or maybe I should say everyday understanding of water as we do. Because in our everyday life, we don't need to know about water being H2O. That's not key information. It doesn't really inform us to do anything in our day-to-day. It doesn't help us, wash the dishes, take a shower, flush a toilet, drink a glass of water. So Dr. Bogardus was trying to get at that idea of just think of the concept of the thing outside of, human definitions, human labels. And Bosch proved he was unwilling to do that. It's unsure if he was up in the comments. It's unsure of why he didn't really want to do this. But we'll get into it. Because Bosch made a response further building on this idea. This is kind of a two-part video where he talks about there's been a lack of debates from Bosch Um, I have some speculation on why that might be, but I think it's important to first set up this because I think I have a feeling this debate might have kind of informed some of this because this debate didn't go well, and it went. To be honest, it didn't go well for Vosh, but it went a lot better than it should have because this Dr. Bogardus he's not a debater. He's not coming on here to dunk on people. And if he did, I'd probably look bad for his job because he has to somewhat stay respectful. We came on here to really kind of let the ideas do battle. Let's keep sophistry, rhetoric, all this other stuff out of the way. So when Dr. Bogardus was trying to explain this idea of something existing naturally in the world, such as water, which is H2O, outside of human conception, there's just this thing that regardless of human existence, would be here. And he's trying to get that idea across to Vosh. Vosh wasn't willing to take it, and so we get this kind of weird interaction. I don't know where to start. It is kind of to start here.
That is perfectly delineates in all categories and situations between cool and uncool people.
Okay, so you said the concepts are incoherent and inconsistent, but I think what you just mean is perhaps vague, so allow for borderline cases, or difficult to articulate. I think maybe that's what you mean when you say all definitions are incoherent and inconsistent, all definitions of gender anyway. I think what you mean is they allow for borderline cases, they'll be vague in various ways, or difficult to articulate. I think maybe that's what you mean when you say all definitions are incoherent and inconsistent, all definitions of gender anyway. I think what you mean is they allow for borderline cases. They'll be vague in various ways. And what was the second thing I said? Vague in various ways and hard to articulate, difficult to articulate. It'll be hard to come up with or express or verbalize a definition that includes everyone who should be included and excludes everyone who should be excluded. So that's the view. I guess I would agree with that. Yeah, definitions are hard to come by typically. And most of them, especially in biology, are vague and admit of borderline cases. But nevertheless, they may be true. There may be true definitions, even if they're difficult to express or articulate. You gave the example, one of your arguments against the biological definition of woman was that we didn't know about chromosomes many years ago. Well, first of all, I don't think biological sex is defined in terms of chromosomes. But let's just use the example of water. Maybe we could agree that water is H2O.
So if you don't understand that, is we have this understanding of what a thing is, even though we don't maybe have all the facts known or right. So for example, we had men and women before we understood chromosomes or even DNA or genes or whatever. And we had water before we understood water as a molecule, understanding that it was H2O, 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen.
That was true even before we knew about chemistry. That was the definition of water before anybody knew anything about chemistry, before we knew about H2O. Back when Aristotle thought water was just an element. Nevertheless, it was H2O. I'm sorry?
This isn't true.
And so Bosch goes a little off the rails here. Actually, he goes way off the rails here.
That water has not always been H2O?
Yeah, all you have to do is cross the Mexican border. And over there, it's aqua. That's H2O, not water.
Aqua means water. Aqua is water.
Term.
Actually, it's agua. It's not aqua, right?
And we're referring to terms and definitions here.
No, I'm referring to water, the stuff that fills lakes and rivers. I'm not talking about the word water.
Many things fill lakes and rivers.
Okay.
So I have to say that feels incredibly pedantic. And I think later on, maybe because Vosh does have the kind of nihilistic, where the world is kind of what we can make it. The meaning of life is exactly what we decide it to be, and that kind of all. I don't really know this, but basically from this debate, it would kind of feel like everything humans categorize, perceive. Everything that we create has some kind of utility, because we wouldn't create it unless it had a utility. And so the names and definitions we give things are necessarily prescriptive because we're doing something for utility's sake. And I think the reason this became such a meme is because it's obvious what Dr. Bogardus is getting at. He's trying to get at the actual thing and leave behind the human creations. So almost like imagine a world in which humans don't exist. Let's just imagine water, right? And Vosh, of course, wants to fight him on that. So I think he got a lot of heat. Vosh got a lot of heat for this. I mean, just even the comments. You know, for example, Vosh's Aqua bit, maybe the biggest fail I've ever seen in debate. 251. Pretty, the highest. Vosh did a terrible job. Thumbs up if you appreciate how James got the debate. We're all rolling immediately. Starts. Freestyle is extremely infantile. As in orbit. But to show how dumb and big are. So I think you can say whatever you want to say about modern day debate. Its audience, I would think its audience is fairly neutral because they host debates from a wide range of things. They definitely, if they do have a bent, it's not obvious. They do a really good job, I think, of being as neutral as possible, hosting as many interesting debates as possible that don't get, too wild. I think they kind of have to limit some things. It's a little too graphic or is necessarily offensive. Because I mean, even this debate, you could argue that this debate is necessarily offensive to trans women. But I think I applaud them for taking it. But so Vosh got a lot of fucking shit for this, and I think that's fine. I don't think he did a good job in this debate. I felt like I felt like Dr. Bogardus came out, did a great job of basically saying these are all the ways that I can perceive of you making or you justifying the claim that all trans women are women. 100% of trans women are women. And these are the avenues that I can perceive in which you would justify that. And here's why I think those avenues are wrong in justifying why 100% of trans women are women. And I think he did a very good job of that. And I don't think Vosh I think Vosh was almost on the defense this entire debate, never really attacking any of his knockdown arguments for those things. And it felt like Vosh was always kind of shifting and pivoting. No, he wasn't pivoting, but he was always kind of shifting and moving around in his justification for why 100% of trans women are women. I think Vosh really struggled with this debate, and I think a big reason why he struggled with this debate is two reasons. One, I don't know if I've seen every Vosh trans debate, but I've seen a lot of them, and I should have pulled the video before I started streaming, but Vosh has said, it was when he was commenting on Hassan's Christian Walker debate, which went terribly for Hassan, because Hassan should be this political, veteran, arguing against Christian Walker, who is obviously a dumbass. And Hassan struggled incredibly so to handle Christian Walker's, basic, dumb, anti-trans arguments. And Vosh said, the thing you should just do is ask them what a woman is. Because obviously defining what a woman is incredibly, incredibly difficult. Like Dr. Bogardus said earlier, the definition of a woman, even if we were to go by just looks, like what does a woman look like? It would be incredible. It would be, you know what I mean? But it somehow internally, we all kind of know. Like if we were to only use he, she pronouns, I think most of us could, within at least 90% of the human population across the globe, and even probably throughout time, would be able to accurately tell if a person was a man or a woman. I think we'd be able to do that with pretty good accuracy. But I think it'd be very hard for us to define what a woman is that would capture 90% of women. I mean, it'd probably even be 95, maybe even 99%. 99 or 95% of women across the globe and throughout time. But I think we could still do that. We still have that process, that accurate process in our head. And so, yeah, Vosh didn't ask for him to define it, which is, usually a staple of Vosh to do that, because then he very easily will kind of show the weaknesses in their definition and work from there and just kind of basically justify, like, hey, it's very difficult to define a woman. So it doesn't really make sense for us to impose what a woman should be if we can't even define what a woman should be, because then we're imposing these like weird restrictions or roles on something that we're not even really sure what it is. So why even try to contain it and force it to be something that we aren't even sure we know what it is? And I think that was really good advice. And I think Vosh usually does a really good job in trans debates, but he did not do a good job in this one. And I think it's fine to do bad in some debates or whatever. But another big reason that's, I would say, much less forgivable is Vosh did no prep for this debate. Admittedly, he said so. He said, I'm going into a debate with a PhD, a philosophy PhD, and doing zero prep, which, very bold. I applaud his bravery. But Dr. Bogardus he has many published papers out about his positions and his arguments that he essentially lays out in the beginning. He has papers that lay out all of these. And Vosh made the mistake of, when trying to jump between these avenues of justification, he walked into a lot of arguments that Dr. Bogardus had already laid out. So Vosh was essentially, it would be like me trying to argue with Vosh on something that Vosh has argued several times. So it'd be like me trying to argue with Vosh, are all trans women women? Vosh has had this argument 100 times. So there's probably very few things I could say that would surprise Vosh unless I really, really prepared. And so what happened here is Vosh was saying justifications that are, pretty good justifications, but he's a philosophy PhD who's thought about this very carefully and analyzed this very carefully and worked through this very carefully and written papers about this, peer-reviewed papers about this. So he's had a lot of perspective and a lot of work into his perspectives, into why these are wrong. And he's explained why they're wrong. And so Vosh was walking into these arguments that he already had answers for, that were knockdown arguments against what Vosh was saying. So then Vosh kind of ended up switching in between these different things and was never really able to attack any of these sufficiently against Dr. Bogardus. So I think that's kind of it. I don't think there's really much more I can say. I think you guys get the idea. But I think this debate, because it didn't go well for Vosh, I think it's kind of giving him the idea that I think Vosh is very much in a rock and a hard place with debate right now. Because I think he's kind of at that level in the space where there's not that much people his size that he wants to debate. Like, he doesn't want to debate. He won't debate Destiny, as far as I understand. And maybe he will, but it doesn't seem like he will. He had a debate with Rose Wrist that didn't go well, or he didn't like it because he felt like Rose Wrist was Fed posting. He also took a question from Destiny. He didn't love that. So I just don't know who's out there for Vosh to debate that he would enjoy debating, where it could be contentious. Because Vosh has also stated that he has a rule about platforming people who he finds very disagreeable, and so, there's I think even Mr. Girl would be too disagreeable for him. And Mr. Girl, although was very spicy in that first debate he had with Vosh, I think he's not nearly as reprehensible as a lot of people, I think, in Vosh's community and Vosh himself believe him to be. Which, I think is fine, because Mr. Girl was really creepy in that first debate with Vosh. But I think there's just a lot of, the red pill people, alt-righters, Nazis, you name it. I think there's a lot of those people who Vosh feels very uncomfortable platforming, because Vosh is on that kind of radical left where a lot of people in his circles believe platforming is very irresponsible. I did the video with President Sunday criticizing Destiny, even though his main critique of Destiny was that he's not just debating with them, he's being too friendly with them so they can be charismatic and capture an audience like, which is fun. I don't think that's that terrible of a thing, but a lot of people will say that even you just debating and doing a pretty good job of debating these people will still be platforming them. You're giving them space to breathe. You're giving them an audience, and thus helping their career. So you platforming someone means, a bad person, like an alt-righter, racist, whatever you name it, gets an audience, they get money, and they can further their political projects, their political ideas, which we believe are bad and are hurting people. So thus, you're helping them hurt people, which is not good. And I don't agree with that idea. I think Bosch should debate a lot. I think he's really, really good at debate. And so I think he's kind of running into this weird spot in his career at the level he is, where if he's going to be that selective about who he chooses to debate, they're going to be hard debates or they're going to be dumb debates. We had that debate with Alex Stein about drag shows, which just a kind of a dumb debate. Bosch did okay in it, did fine in it. But it's just like nothing of note, because I think at the end of the day, that's not really something anyone can argue about. You're not really saying political ideas. It just felt like something that, nothing coming from this really matters, which is fine. It's just not very exciting. I don't know, and maybe that's just my opinion. I didn't find it very exciting. It just felt like, okay, who cares? And so I think a lot of people in his community are looking back at Bosch's old debates and kind of pining for that old Bosch, where Bosch used to, really dunk on a lot of people. Used to kind of seem like it was like a real political project where he was discovering these far right ideas and just destroying them, and kind of helping us all see why the right is so bad and why like the left is so good, and giving us the tools for us to use against the right in arguments online, in person, whatever. But it doesn't seem like he does that much anymore. It seems like he does much more React content, which is fine, but in my opinion, it's more boring. I think debate is very fun to watch, and it just doesn't feel like your ideas or your resulting ideas aren't going to be nearly as good unless you're debating, because it's very easy to debate against something that can't push. But let's get into this idea, Bosch's idea from yesterday, addressing the lack of debates and refining the Agua argument.
That I saw, maybe not a ton, I'm over-exaggerating, I'm being a whiny baby. There were a decent number of people in the Discord and in the comments under my last couple of VODs who are complaining about the quality of my streams lately. There are some criticisms that I understand, and there are some criticisms that I really, really don't get. In terms of general, like, presentational style, like charisma, being funny, stuff like that, I feel like I've only gotten better. Totally subjective, by the way. I know I don't scream as often as I used to, but consider that a gift to my roommates, if nothing else. That's just me being considerate.
I feel like I have to disagree with that, because I would say Bosch's funniest moment was with the non-compete. That's easily the hardest I've laughed watching Bosch. I don't think I've ever laughed that hard again. But that also just might have been like a golden moment, not necessarily like an average indicative of that era of his comedy.
I feel like in those respects, it's been pretty uphill. In terms of like the content that I do, it varies a lot. I know people miss the debates. I do want to get back to doing debates. It's just very difficult to get like the really spicy stuff sometimes. It can be tough. Especially since I'm sensitive to like the like crazy grifters who are just like, it does not, like, they don't give a fuck about what they or I say. They just want to be on the stream for the attention or notoriety.
So an example of this is when I was covering the President Sunday getting upset with Destiny. When President Sunday debated Destiny about platforming, President Sunday's example was Demon Mama made a big stink on Twitter to Destiny. The argument was pretty dumb. And Destiny thought, I'll have her come on stream, kind of destroy her, because I'm willing to bite all these bullets, and I think these bullets aren't that bad, and I think ultimately Demon Mama look foolish. But Demon Mama is an expert at, kind of the circus of debate. She's good at making it very contentious, very fun, very high energy, very loud, kind of like a train wreck basically. So nothing gets solved. Maybe things get worse. Nothing gets there's no good ideas that get fleshed out. It's just kind of two people yelling at each other, and it's fun to watch. And so I think Vosh is right to be worried about that. How some people might get on here and just almost basically troll him, or that they'll say they have some ridiculous position that Vosh has to kind of contend with, even though they don't really believe it. And so it wouldn't be fun because they would be arguing disingenuous. And I agree with that. I think that would be very boring, especially to learn, they were just trolling you, or they got on here just to try to get you upset. That wouldn't be fun. But I think Vosh could, because he could kind of be like a kingmaker, like Destiny often acts like, where you can have these people on, and if they start being dickheads, or they start being trolls, or they start being unproductive, you should be like, okay, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. You know what I mean? And I think he should really exercise that power. Maybe he believes that'd be unbecoming of him, but I disagree. I think I can agree with that. I wish I could debate with endless people all the time myself, but obviously I can't because I'm way too small. No one would care. But I think it'd be really cool if he had people come on and just kind of argue about it. Like, I always really enjoyed when he argued with socialists. Like, even the way he acted with Chaos Mel, where he was very aggressive with the mute button. I think he could do that. I think he could always do that. I think that'd be really, really fun to watch. I mean, maybe not be that aggressive with it, because I think rhetorically, optically, it didn't look good for Vosh, even though Chaos Mel is insane, and her ideas are clearly just so poisoned. Just so unreflective of reality. But I think Vosh could do that. So he doesn't have to worry about these trolls getting out of hand. He could just be like, look, you're being bananas. Ending this call. And then move on. Like he did with Mr. Girl. Because Mr. Girl definitely did with his first debate with Vosh. Maybe first and only debate with Vosh. Definitely started saying some weird stuff. And it was just like, yeah, I don't want to engage with this. This is making me uncomfortable. I think people in my audience are getting uncomfortable. I choose to leave. And I think Vosh is well in his right to do that. It would just be nice if he did that more.
I don't like that shit, I don't want to give those people the time of day, because it's like I'm not doing anything there except for being the platform that they use to get attention. Yeah. Yeah, I don't really like the group debates either. The hippy dippy ended, and I don't think that'll affect me that much, because I don't think I was going to do stuff like that much more anyway. Because, oh god, this feels like so conceited or whatever, but it's like Republicans are literally laying the groundwork for ending democracy. And then it's like, all right, time to talk with a bunch of other people, three of whom are, because they had to be found to provide the debate. Like, three of them are just like arbitrarily evil or have like the objectively wrong take on this. And now get in the 4-hour Thunderdome where you do nothing but signal boost their positions for comedic and entertainment value,
I agree with that. I think panels are just often very bad. Unless you have, you'll see this when Vosh would go on panels, and you'll see this with Destiny. They're both very well respected, well known, so I think a lot of people will just shut up when they're on panels and they're talking. But then you could get someone who's like deciding to be brave, to say, this is my chance, that if I can like really call them out, Vosh and Destiny, if I can get them to target me and they'll talk a lot and everyone else will shut up, it'll give me a chance to just kind of have a back and forth with them, which undoubtedly that'd be incredibly annoying. And it just feels like panels where you'll be going down a line of argumentation, and then someone else is like, "Oh, I want to say something," but it was from back then. So now let's do this. We're going to go in reverse and talk about this, and then you kind of lose the momentum of your argumentation. So it just doesn't feel productive. It feels like solely for entertainment value, without really ever fleshing out any idea better than just a surface level engagement.
You know, and you're like, and the only thing that I feel like when I'm sitting there is like I'm trying to think of like a good comparison or whatever, but it feels like whatever kind of performative theater it is, it doesn't feel like an appropriate kind. Like if these were on totally like meaningless subjects or stuff that wasn't that like pressing right now, I think it could be more fun. So, like, for example, the idea of having, like, a group debate convo but with, like, some other lefties about, like, some contentious left debate issues, I think that could be fun, because I don't feel like I'm providing a spectacle out of giving attention to them. It feels like a kind of fucked up, like, reverse minstrel show, where the group that's suffering is not the group that's being minstrelized, you know? And it's like conservatives are up there with, like, clown pants and, like, giant hats or whatever, and they're like dancing and I'm throwing tomatoes. And then I look back and like the people who are suffering aren't the conservatives, it's us. Because conservatives are getting to do what they like to do most, which is wear clown pants and dance while tomatoes get thrown on them, you know? And so like there's no harm, and it's not like a 9-person debate is like the avenue for me to provide my best arguments on a subject, you know? Yeah. That's always going to come from non-debates, you know? Yeah, fuck, I don't know. The one debate we did recently that I'm really fond of in retrospect was the debate that was with that professor dude who was anti-trans women or whatever. Because there was an argument that I got out of that I've later refined.
So he's talking about Dr. Bogardus, and he's going to bring up the Aqua argument.
And I feel like the argument is like a perfect argument now. I feel like I have it down perfectly, right? You know? Which argument? The agua, when I aguad all over his face. What argument? The trans water? Okay, but it's like a better trans water argument, okay? Here's the argument now, as I understand it, okay? So, transphobes often argue on the idea that woman...
And he's not really referring to the trans... When he was talking about the trans water, he was talking about deuterium, which is an isotope. An oxygen isotope. It's the same molecular formula, but the oxygen that is in that H2O compound constituting the water molecule is an isotope. So it's not regular oxygen. It's an isotope of oxygen. And it has slightly different properties. So it's not really water. That's why we call it heavy water. But whatever.
Is like an innate set in stone concept referring to like gametes or something, because they can't say like it's when you have like tits or pussy, because you can grow tits or pussy now, you can do magic, you know, whatever. It's like gametes and chromosomes or whatever, you know, like an innate thing. And then so naturally my argument is like, okay, well, what if there's more social utility to including people who are like Blair White into woman? Like if you...
So this is where I think Vosh was fundamentally and earlier why we saw that breakdown when Dr. Bogardus brought up water, you know, in it filling lakes and rivers. Vosh said, that's not true. You go across the border and you find agua, not water. And so I think that was the fundamental, and apparently still so, the fundamental disconnect between the two. Where Dr. Bogardus' whole thing was, how can we work to get closer to truth? For example, and he said this in the debate with Vosh, that Aristotle thought water was an element, not a molecule. He just thought it was something, like gold or iron. That it was just this pure thing that was consistent throughout. It was just this one thing. And Dr. Bogardus' argument was, if we thought for whatever reason that there was social utility in that designation of water, that it's an element and not a molecule, H2O, would it be right to say, it doesn't matter what the truth is, we're going to leave it here because we believe this is what's best? Dr. Bogardus' argument was that should never happen. We should always be looking to find the truth and then define and then decide how to best use that truth for the best utility. And so I think what Bosch isn't like, this is crazy to me that Bosch is saying this here, because I think it just shows a real lack of understanding of Dr. Bogardus' position, where Dr. Bogardus really just wants to get to the truth, using logic, largely just using logic. And it seems like Bosch is still trying to do the prescriptive definition thing, where he's saying, what's going to maximize our social utility, and trying to frame it through the water argument that Dr. Bogardus did. But that's not really the argument Dr. Bogardus is making with the water, where Dr. Bogardus is just trying to make the argument that water would exist outside of humans, regardless of our definitions, labels, conceptions, ideas of water. It would still just be water, and it would be the water we know it, largely. It just wouldn't have our understandings or conceptions of it. It would just be its thing. And so it's just weird that Bosch is still going back to this whole labels thing, where it's not even the original argument, and it was never about social utility.
If you can get people on a very basic, like, gatekeepy trend.
And I think that also just might be, I think Bosch might be a little bit, I'm not going to say that. Okay.
Trans-medicalist acceptance of women as part of an argument in favor, like, that's better than total like rejection of trans identity, right? Like, something, like, okay, so if people who are totally pass as a woman can be considered a woman, then maybe, like, what about here, and then you get people to the total, like, arbitrarity of the concept, right? But the argument is this, okay? So the argument is about, like, the semantic and totally arbitrary and flexible nature of language, and it's about water, okay? Are you ready for it? Okay. So imagine you have two people, right? It's me and it's you. The chat is, like, collectively a person. You're so handsome. Congratulations, okay? And I'm like, hey, do you want this water bottle? And you don't trust me. So you're like, what's in this water bottle? Why are you giving it to me? And I'm like, oh, it's just water. Don't worry about it. They smile and hand you the water bottle, okay? And you're like, okay. And you drink the water bottle, all right? Now, here's the thing, okay? Here's the trick. I lied to you. It's not just water. Inside that water bottle are actually several parts per million of trace minerals that get added to every water bottle produced by that company to promote teeth health. There's, like, a little bit of basic mineral additive to maintain proper flavor and dental health. Now, jokes aside, if I pointed that out to you, did I lie to you when I said it was just water? Like really, right? So when I said it's just water, did I lie? In a semantic sense, no. No one in reality would ever say that was a lie. No one would ever say that. I mean, there are people saying yes right now because I'm, like, playing it up for the sake of the argument, but, like, in reality, no human would consider that a lie. Like, nobody's ever, like.
So I think we would agree it's technically a lie if you knew that. But I think this is what I think Bosch isn't getting. When Dr. Bogardus was talking about water, that's why he said H2O. He wanted to bring it to just this. Because if I put a glass of water in front of you and say it's just water, you're going to assume, your understanding of that will be, it's just like any other glass of water. This is just, your everyday water, which might have things in it. Where you're not really, like, in the social understanding of it, you're not lying. That's kind of how we encounter water in our day-to-day life. But if you really wanted to say, what is water? You wouldn't say, water is this plus minerals. You would say, no, water is just H2O. Nothing else is water. Only this is water. This is the water we know, and we define as water. This whole thing about minerals isn't getting to the truth of what water is. It's just kind of it's just our common everyday interaction with water.
Like Ben said, here's a thing, but it's wrong because you didn't give the molecular composition of every atom in it. That's, like, really dumb, right? So, okay, imagine the same scenario over again, second time, I hold out the water to you, and you're like, "What's in it?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's just water." Okay. And you drink it. And I did lie to you again. Okay. In that water is several parts per million of cyanide, a lethal amount actually, and you die. Now, did I lie to you when I said it's just water? Well, now you're dead, so you can't really answer. But now your ghost is there, okay? Your ghost is talking to me now. Did I lie to you when I said it's just water? Everyone would believe yes. Literally everyone. Yeah, you laced it with poison. It's not.
And again, but that's not our common interaction with water. That's not a part of the usual experience of water. Your usual experience of water is that you'll drink it and you'll be fine. It'll rehydrate you and you'll go about your day. Nothing else. But what he's describing here isn't our common interaction with water like it would be with a pure glass of water with some minerals in it. That's an everyday interaction with water. That's a very familiar form of water, or mixture of water, I should really say. This mixture of water with cyanide isn't a common interaction, isn't a common entity, isn't a common mixture that we come across with water on a regular basis. Almost no one has come across it. So I think it would behoove you to point out that unique difference between the common experience of what most people experience water is. Again, this isn't what Dr. Bogardus is trying.
Just water. The question is, why was the latter a lie and the former not? In both cases, the parts per million of non-water was the same. The amount of water per volume of liquid was identical in both cases. Utility, right there. Because it wasn't just whether or not it was water, it was whether it would serve the purpose of water. That's it. When people hear it's just water, they're not actually asking, is it the chemical water in its entirety? They're asking, does it serve the purpose of water? Is it functionally water? Will it do what I expect it to? It's shared communication. You're actually making assumptions on both ends, right? We do this all the time for like a ton of things, right? What flows through rivers? Water does. But like, not really. Water in a river is like 5% sediment, sometimes more. But we still say it's water because when we say it's river water or water flows through the river, you know what the other person means. But here's the other thing. If you were to bottle river water and give it to another person saying it's just water and they drank it and they spat it out because it's river water, you would have lied to them. So it's water in the river, but it's not water in the water bottle, is it? It's dirty water. Because water in a water bottle is supposed to be clean. So when you say it's water, you're not really saying it's water. You're saying it's water in line with the service expectation and functionality that you would expect of water in a water bottle. This is a linguistic game we do like 24/7, all the time, without realizing it. It's just like a potable water, but not just potable water, right? There are other changes that you could make to that water that are potable, makes it potable, but you'd still be like, what the fuck is this, There are other things that you could do. Potable water can have trace amounts of your urine in it, couldn't it? Yeah, it could. There are so many little presuppositions that we make when it comes to like what things are, and you can lie while
right. But I think Vosh he's trying to zoom out a little bit here. That's just not connecting with the original Dr. Bogardus argument. Dr. Bogardus is just trying to get him to what is water. What is the most truth statement we can make on what water is? And it's a molecule that is made up of two hydrogens bonded to an oxygen. And that's what water is. That's the most truthful definition of what we know water to be. We didn't come up with that based on some perceived utility. Even though but that's just how we perceive water to be. And there's nothing influencing that. That's just, to the best of our abilities, that's the most truthful interpretation of what water is. Purely what water is. What he's doing here is more he's backing it up into the like linguistic game of, you know, common parlance and like how we kind of interact with each other, and, you know, use words as models to impart meaning, even though if it's not perfect meaning that we had in our heads, because the words that we use to convey an idea isn't always perfect, and it's often imperfect, and so there can be confusion there, and we might talk in generalities and majorities instead of talking about, you know, exactly what everything is that we're trying to perceive, because we, you know, it might just make sense to say what's in this water bottle, it's water, when it's 99% water, but obviously, you know, what, as Vosh said, there is like that kind of function idea where if it tastes like, if you pee, if 1% of it was pee, you probably would want to know that about water, because that's going to significantly change the flavor and probably disgust you if you drink it. But that's not what Dr. Bogardus was getting at.
While telling the truth, can't you? Right? What's that in the river? Water. True. What's this in the water bottle? Water. False. This is river water.
But those would still be true statements, because the water is in. Because he's getting into these different. Because it isn't. This is just like. I'm just gonna let him go. Let him go.
I think this is remarkable.
Go off, Roush.
There are no like firm lines anywhere here. It's just like an abstract language game. Now, with all of this being established, woman refers to gametes and hormone.
Okay, and again, this isn't what Dr. Bogardus said. Dr. Bogardus said this for female and male, because that's what sex is. Said in that video, in that debate with Vosh, that what is sex? Sex is what we define in biology to be something where there is two members or two categories of a species, and if you took a member from both, they would both have the gametes to produce offspring. Because what sex is the combining of two gametes to intermix their DNA to produce an outcome that has DNA from both parents. So by definition, two males can't produce a baby, two females can't produce a baby. And so, but a male and a female can, so thus there's that categorization. There's no other category, there's no other dimension or perspective to view on it. It's just male and female. Those are the ingredients you need, assuming everything's functioning properly, both healthy candidates can produce an offspring of DNA mixed from both. The man and the woman thing is something different. I don't want to say entirely, but it's a different argument, because there's less of an obvious fact of the matter that there is for sex as a category and the function or the activity that dictates that category. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm just talking to myself and being insane, but continue, Vouch.
And that's all it means? Really? So water.
And he might be misspeaking there. He might be meaning to say female, male.
A definitive molecular compound that can be observed in reality as an empirical thing has a bunch of different definitions depending on its use and value and utility. Water is a molecule. You can test scientifically whether something is water or not.
But I think, I don't know if this is even worth getting on, because I think we do this, you know, humans by nature, we're lazy. Well, we always kind of do a shorthand for a lot of things. You know what I mean? So, like, for example, if you wanted to describe a feeling or a sensation or experience, your go-to route would be like, well, have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? Have you ever felt this? Have you ever tasted that? Have you ever tried doing this? Because that would be much more easy. It's like, oh, it's kind of like that, where you don't have to explain the whole roundabout feeling and all the interacting factors. You would just say, it's pretty similar to that. That's kind of a shorthand way to do that, but those experiences probably aren't one-to-one for that person to the experience you're trying to describe, but they might be really close. They might be, you know, 80% close or 90% close. And so humans, a lot of the time we do that. We can't, it would take too much time, too much effort, or even maybe just impossible to always be 100% descriptive about everything we're talking about. Like if we were talking about, if I were to go to, fill up a water bottle with river water, I guess I could say this is river water, but it could be from a pristine river like in Wyoming or something, and that would be fine. Or it could be the Potomac River, which is apparently a hellscape, and you're never supposed to drink for it, not even supposed to go in it. And so those are different. So it would be Potomac River water. And so we're just adding on more and more descriptors to describe what this water is, to describe what the experience would be to someone who were to drink from this water bottle. But oftentimes we're very lazy. And we only want to really, we only really break our threshold break our threshold to not be lazy if we feel like there is a good utility that'll come from it. So if someone were to give you just a regular Dasani water bottle, I don't think they need to give you any other descriptions because you've probably had a Dasani before. But if they gave you another one that's river water, you would expect them to be like, hey, this water's from a river, because you're obviously probably not going to like it, and that's something you'd probably want to know, and that I think most people would agree that you would want to know. And so it would break that kind of threshold of, this is worth me spending energy on, and to not be lazy, to inform them of that this is river water, this isn't just any regular water.
It's not some arbitrary concept like, a woman refers to some things. No, water refers to water. That's what it means. And still, even with water, it can be this like really contextual language game. But with woman, we're just supposed to believe it's like, oh, it's biology and that's that, It's just this, Now, you can't always make this argument directly to a conservative, but you guys, is this not valuable? For me personally, I think understanding this is a phenomenal tool in the understanding how to break these like linguistically prescriptivist conservative arguments. I think that's it's very powerful. Again, like you can't just like sit a conservative down and do like the 5-minute rant at them. I do think you can do some back and forth though, because you would ask them the questions. Ask them, am I lying when I say this is water when it just has the trace minerals? No. Am I lying when I say this is water and it's got cyanide? Yes. Why? And here's the thing. They cannot engage in linguistic prescriptivism without, like, while still answering that question. You see? Answering that question, how something can be true or false when describing empirical molecular structures depending entirely on utility, and only being asked.
So I get this is a good argument from Vaj. I totally get where he's going with this. I agree. I don't think this would really fool that many, because I think at that point, see, this is interesting, because then I think the conservative, if they knew Vaj and they knew his technique, they could just be like, okay, then you tell me define what a woman is. And then we would just be right back to what Dr. Bogardus was talking about, where he would have to go down one of these things, and it would hopefully take it out of the linguistic game, and you'd get down to these like logical avenues through which you could justify all trans women are women. Where it seems like currently in this perspective, this line of argumentation, it's much more of the linguistic game. Because if I were to ask you, define water, I think if you wanted to give the most truthful, exact definition of what water is, it would just be H2O.
Asked whether something is water, they cannot answer that without cracks opening in their argument. Yeah, okay, so I'm rambling now, but that's yeah. I thought about this after, and I got some helpful emails, and I think that's very this is a better argument than the Aqua one. The thing that frustrated me about the Aqua thing is that he didn't like bite, right? Like language doesn't involve perfect translations from culture to culture. They're like different words that we translate between different cultures can mean different things in subtle and.
Yeah, but there's no way Mexicans have a different conception of water. English speakers, right? If you were to ask them, like, if you could speak perfect Spanish and you were to describe water without ever saying agua, I think you could be like, hey, what hydrates you? What do you shower with? I think they would be like agua. And you would be like, wow, is it just by perfect chance that Mexicans, through some, holy novel pathway have come to the same understanding as English speakers of water? Probably not. It's probably that water has these properties that informs humans' usage of said water.
Sometimes really obvious ways. So, like, if the definition for a woman translates into woman for another culture or another time period, but that version of woman has different parameters, like, how do you say which one is objective and which one isn't, you know? The only point that I was trying to arrive at, which he didn't, like, engage with.
So, again, this is what maybe what I think caused this argument. I mean, this would be really hard to deal with no prep. Is Dr. Bogardus wasn't really trying to say there is an objective way to do it. He's almost saying that you just can't do it objectively, or we don't have the tools yet or understanding, or maybe he thinks he does, but my understanding was that Dr. Bogardus' whole thing was there's really no objectively we can't ever make this all trans women are women and it be a true statement. Because it's really hard to be objective in defining what a woman is. That's the issue. And we may not know that, and we may never know that. But the whole point of Dr. Bogardus' argument was that Bosch had made these claims for why all trans women are women and why those are logically wrong. And Bosch was unable to knock down those arguments. I don't think the arguments he's making here in this video are really addressing those arguments from Dr. Bogardus.
Because I think he's literally like a hardline definitional prescriptivist who doesn't believe words can change, which is insane.
No, I think.
But I wanted to get him on like the linguistic ambiguity, like the language game kind of thing, you know. But that's okay. That whole argument, I think, was me like tearing his arguments to shreds, or like that whole convo was me tearing his arguments to shreds, I think. So I don't feel bad about that at all. But don't we differentiate between mineral water and distilled water? Yeah, but they're both water, aren't they? And if somebody asked you for water, would they tell you that you did something wrong if you brought mineral water or distilled water to the absence of the other? It's all language games. We may be able to define differences between these things, but that doesn't mean there aren't overlapping categories. And so much ambiguity, you know? So much ambiguity. Another example of the ambiguity of language would be that we refer to gold, even if it's low carat gold. So even if a gold is like an alloy that is less than 50% gold, people will still call it gold rather than the other component in the alloy, even if it represents more than 50% of the composition of the metal, you know? The only reason gold is what's being referred to there, like 10 karat gold or whatever.
He should honestly have this debate with someone. I think that'd be so entertaining. I mean, addressing the lack of debates. Have this debate with someone. Debate this with someone. Yeah, honestly, you should debate Destiny with this. Like, that'd be a really interesting conversation, but we'll see. I honestly am, with bated breath, excited for Bosch's next trend.
Whatever. The only reason it's being called gold there is because we consider gold more valuable than the other thing that's in the alloy. But that's like an arbitrary, because
It's not arbitrary, though. It's about purity. Is that arbitrary? Or he's just saying that why we call it gold. But if it looks gold, I mean, if I guarantee if it didn't look gold, we wouldn't call it gold, right? But if it gave it that nice gold sheen, you might say, yeah, this is gold. And you could use that for, industrial purposes or decorative purposes, like gold plating something where you don't have to use pure gold. You can use a fraction of the gold. So it's much cheaper to do that, but it still gives the same effect of looking like something's made out of gold. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little off the rails here.
Usually talking jewelry. So this isn't like for industrial purposes or whatever. We're saying like, yeah, this is 10 karat gold as opposed to like 14 karat some other thing, with gold being the additive, because the gold is what we're after. But that's like an arbitrary social preference. Why then do we call it gold? Well, maybe terms refer to arbitrary social preferences and not to fundamental reality. You get me. Water and steam are both water, but water is not. Terms refer to arbitrary social preferences and not to fundamental reality. You get me. water and steam are both water, but water is not steam. Yeah, if a person asks you to get water and you bring ice, people be like, "What the fuck? Why'd you bring me ice?" They meant water, but ice is water, obviously. You know. Likewise, if someone asked you to bring them ice and you brought water, but it's
Hold on.
so much.
Okay, if you brought, he's kind of just doing the descriptive thing, where if you asked for water and someone brought you ice, it wouldn't technically be wrong. 'Cause you could always kind of say, well, you know, I don't know what. No, actually, no, because water is liquid water. And ice is literally water plus a certain temperature, or water at a certain temperature and state. So if you ask for water, or if you ask for ice and they brought you water, they'd be like, you chose wrong. This isn't right. If you had the choice, if you had the ability to get me ice and instead you brought me water, you did a bad thing. You did the wrong thing. You should have gotten me that fucking ice and you got me water.
Much of language is not about objective reality. It's about common understandings. Read Wittgenstein. I swear to God, this dude was on the ball for like everything. Language is about a communication game that people play with each other, where we have shared understandings of culture and shared under.
Yeah, but what informs that common understanding is reality, is it not? Like, because I don't know. You would have to get into such a crazy headspace to start saying reality doesn't inform our understandings, because then that means we could have wholly like it's kind of like that joke I made about the Mexicans and their understanding of water, where they just so happen by pure statistical chance somehow in the universe they were able to arrive at using water in the same way that us in America use water, just by chance somehow. But that's not what happened. What happened is that as people, we can observe water and understand water and its properties, and thus choose how to best use water for the utilities we think it would be best used for. So like showering, toilets, drinking, cooking, whatever. So we're understanding the same reality of water. We're not the reality of water is what's informing our understanding. And so our understanding, as well as Mexicans, we have a shared understanding there of water that is being informed by the reality of what water is in our reality.
Understandings of culture and environmental context, and we use that to implicitly, quietly agree on things that are loaded presuppositionally in the terms we use to describe them.
I think, again, that's just the shorthand. It's too time-consuming, too effortful, or it's just, for us to do this, it would just be, there'd be no return on it. I'm trying to save myself some time here. I don't want to tell you and explain to you very in-depth, why there is 0.00001% minerals in this water when it's not going to affect you at all. It's not going to change your experience at all. So why would I spend my time doing that? I guess that goes back to the utility thing, but I think at a certain point we have to understand that we can hit a threshold where it becomes important to understand. It can become important to explain things in very exact ways, or if someone were to ask you to explain something in a very exact way, and you were to just say, it's just water, even though it has the cyanide on it, you would be lying to me. You wouldn't be being truthful. And that would be bad, because that wouldn't be the truth. And what Dr. Bogardus, again, is trying to get at, is he's trying to get at the truth of the matter.
Where does a river begin or end? Well, you know what? I have no fucking idea. How long is the U.S. coastline? Is it like the west coastline? Is it 1,200 miles if you just draw a line on a map? What if you trace a line across every single grain of sand that is above the water line? You could get hundreds of thousands of miles. Which one is the correct one? It's literally not possible to tell. If you wanted to, you could break it.
But so, I think Bosch is right here. That's a good point, but I think you could also say what it's not. You could not say the coastline is 1 mile long. You could not say it's 1 AU long, which is an astronomical unit. It's the distance between the sun and the earth. You couldn't say it's that long. We can agree that there is a boundary here, and that boundary might be fuzzy, but there's still, and we can argue about that fuzziness, but it's still there's still that distance there that's not that arbitrary or that fungible. We can still get there and talk about the methods we use to get there, but that's us using methods to try to arrive at the truth. Like, that's just basic science. We can argue about the methods, but what we're trying to ultimately get at is the truth. The methods we use to get to that truth may be a little arbitrary, but really what we're trying to do is just maximize predictive ability in yielding what we believe to be the truth. So you couldn't say, you know, someone maybe has some sophisticated satellite and the way they're doing it or whatever, where they're doing every little inlet, all that stuff for the coastline, and you're just saying, I just walked up all of the coast with a ruler and just kind of went, you know, one after the other. That's how I did it. Wasn't even sure if I was walking in a straight line. I think we could, you know, pretty easily argue why that method wasn't a good method. That method, even though we might arbitrarily, it's not even arbitrary, it's really systematically. It'd be very easy to come up with arguments for why that ruler technique wasn't a good technique and why the other technique, with its sophistication and lack of failures or less possible sources of failures, is a better method for measuring the coastline.
Down to the molecular structure of the grains of sand that are just above the waterline, and it would be changing by millions of miles every second. You know, it would be just totally. It would be like a 27-digit counter that changes so quickly you can never see any of the numbers on it. Like, it's just totally out there.
That's just objectively wrong. That it would change by millions of miles. There's no way it would even be a million miles. I don't know. Let's see. U.S. There's no way. It has to be. There's just absolutely no way it's a million miles. I don't even think it's 10,000 miles. We'll see, though. I'm going to say it's less than. U.S. coastline length. Ooh, way over 10,000. Almost 100,000. Off by almost a factor. Yikes.
There's just no way to know.
Best, but you know, we appreciate it. We love I hope he does more debates. Can't wait to see him. Bausch, can't wait to see you continue the Aqua argument. Arriba.